Well, hello, friends. I hope you're having a great day today. Welcome to Monday's edition of Take 5. Hey, before we get started today, let me just tell you, we had a great day in the house of God yesterday. If you missed our worship service yesterday morning, our discipleship last night, we're in this series about the judgment seat of Christ on Sunday nights. If you missed either one of those, you missed a great time in the house of the Lord. I would like to encourage you to go ahead and make plans to be in the house of God every time you have the opportunity, because that's where God changes us, He challenges us, and He equips us to be the church He's called us to be. Well, this week on Take 5, we're going to be breaking down the message that I preached yesterday, and that message was simply entitled Unnecessary. Now, I realize that's not a very fancy title, and I didn't intend it to be. It's exactly what I wanted it to be, and that is that term, unnecessary. And so what we're going to talk about is the fact that there are things in life that we go through that are unnecessary. Now, I believe absolutely in the divine providence and the sovereignty of God. I believe in God laying out our destiny and designing our lives from before the foundation of the world. I believe in that. I believe that God does use pain and suffering and trials and tribulations in our life. God uses them to work something into our life that we need. But I also know that sometimes we do some things to ourselves. Sometimes we have to go through circumstances that are just unnecessary because we made bad choices, or we made them with a bad attitude, or we were prideful or stubborn, or whatever the case may be. And so this week we're going to try to begin learning how we can avoid these unnecessary storms in life. Let me read to you a passage from 1 Peter chapter 2. He says, "It's commendable if a person bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they're conscious of God." So it's commendable if you suffer justly. If you suffer according to the will of God, it's commendable. But then he said in the next verse, "But how is it to your credit if you suffer for doing wrong and endure it?" So basically he's telling us if you suffer according to the will of God for serving God, that's commendable when you endure it. But he said if you suffer because you did wrong, because you made a bad choice, because you were stubborn or hard-headed or hard-hearted about something, if you have to suffer because of that, basically he's saying that's on you. That's your fault. There's no reward that you'll gain through that. And so that's what I want us to focus in on, are the things that we go through that are unnecessary. Now, no human being escapes all suffering in life. You're just not going to do it. I don't care what the preachers around us on and the Hollywood heroes tell us, that you're just not going to escape all the suffering in life. There's no way to escape the reality that God uses hardships and pain and suffering and trials to make our lives more like Christ. And He does that also to reveal things to us that we would learn no other way. Let's face it, there's just some lessons we wouldn't learn if we didn't have a trial or a storm to go through. Now, I think the Bible is pretty clear, and this text today, I believe, proves it. These two verses that Peter wrote, there is righteous and unrighteous suffering. I prefer to call it necessary and unnecessary suffering. You have both of those in this world. Now, for the sake of understanding, let's real briefly today talk about necessary suffering, because I want you to make sure that you don't confuse that and think that I'm telling you that we don't ever have to go through problems. We do. But some problems we have in our life we bring on ourselves, and the consequences are unnecessary because we made a bad choice or we did it with the wrong attitude. But there is some that is according to the will of God, and we need to understand that. As a matter of fact, 1 Peter chapter 1, those first 6 verses there, Peter is talking to new believers that have been scattered all over many regions and many countries because of their faith in Jesus Christ. They're undergoing much persecution, and he writes to encourage them, and he tells them that they're not an afterthought, that they were in the foreknowledge of God, that they're born again to a living hope, that they have a heavenly inheritance in heaven that will not perish. He tells them you're kept by the power of God. And then in verse 6 he said, and you should rejoice in all these things, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you are grieved by various trials. So Peter says that these trials were necessary Because God does that. He uses the trials and the hardships of life to move us forward if we'll commit to them and not run from them. The storms and the sufferings of life build our faith and add strength to us. And Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1:6 that sometimes these things are a necessary part of life. There just seems to be some things that we'll never learn unless we learn them while going through one of life's storms. And there are greater things that God wants to do in our lives that sometimes can only come to us when we're pushed into them by the pain and the suffering of life. These trying times have a way of teaching us things that we could not and would not learn any other way. So without a doubt, we see that there is necessary suffering. Look what the suffering of Job brought into his life, for example. So we see this necessary suffering, and we know that God uses it to add strength and validity to our faith, and also to impart wisdom to us and revelation that you can't get from any other source. However, and this is where the main meat of this message the rest of the week is going to be, some suffering happens because of the choices that we make and the things that we do to ourselves, which means some suffering and pain is absolutely unnecessary, hence the title of the message. Now, the Bible talks a lot, more than what we think, about these unnecessary things that come into our lives because of the choices that we make. And that's what we're going to look at this week and even next week, Lord willing. We're going to look at these things that come into our life that are unnecessary, that happened because we made bad choices, we made prayerless decisions, or either out of our stubbornness or our ignorance, we refuse to listen to God, and we end up in a situation, a storm, a dilemma in life that was unnecessary because we refused to listen to God. Hey, I think this is going to challenge us. I think it's also going to bring some great understanding if we'll just apply this word about unnecessary storms. I believe God's going to do something in our life. Well, hey, I got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Tuesday's edition of Take 5. Till then, God bless you. Have a great day. Remember, friend, trust the Lord. He will never fail you.